The 22nd of June, 1941. With 134 divisions at full fighting strength and 73 more divisions for deployment behind the front, Nazi Germany, under the code name Operation Barbarossa, invades the Soviet Union, its ally in the war against Poland. Hitler considers the invasion as part of his plan to provide the German nation with Lebensraum, meaning living space, and an opportunity to destroy communism, which he loathes. The Soviet Union sees catastrophic military losses, and millions of its soldiers fall into German captivity, where they are subjected to starvation, disease, and brutal treatment. Thousands of them decide to switch sides, join the German army, and fight against Stalin and his regime. The highest-ranking officer to collaborate with Nazi Germany is General Andrey Vlasov. Andrey Andreyevich Vlasov was born on the 14th of September 1901 in the village of Lomakino, located in the Nizhny Novgorod region, then part of the Russian Empire. He was the 13th child and the youngest son, and his family lived in extreme poverty. After studying at a Russian Orthodox seminary, which he abandoned in 1917 after the October Revolution, he briefly studied agronomy. Vlasov joined the Red Army in 1919, and then fought in the Russian Civil War. In 1930, he joined the Communist Party, and 5 years later, in 1935, Vlasov became a student at the Frunze Military Academy, which was one of the Soviet Union's most prestigious military schools. After completing his studies, he took on significant roles within the military, and his ambitions always took precedence over his moral principles. Vlasov was a member of the military tribunal in the Leningrad and Kiev military districts during the Great Purge, which took place between August 1936 and March 1938. This period saw the imprisonment or execution of over 1 million citizens throughout the Soviet Union, accused of being enemies of the people. In the fall of 1938, enjoying the full trust of the political leadership, Vlasov was sent to the Far East as part of the group of military advisors to Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Republic of China. After 1 year, he was asked to return to the Soviet Union, and his service in China was recognized with great honor. As a farewell before leaving, Vlasov was awarded the Order of the Golden Dragon by Chiang Kai-shek, and Chiang's wife, Mei-ling, gave him a watch. Both the order and the watch were confiscated by the authorities upon Vlasov's return to the Soviet Union. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. Poland found itself fighting a two-front war when it was invaded by the Soviet Union from the east on the 17th of September. Warsaw officially surrendered to the Germans on the 28th of September, and 1 day later, in accordance with a secret protocol to their non-aggression pact, Germany and the Soviet Union partitioned Poland. Upon his return from China, Vlasov served in several assignments before being given command of the 99th Rifle Division, which he completely reformed. After just 9 months under Vlasov's leadership, and following an inspection by Defense Minister Marshal Semyon Timoshenko, the division was recognized as the best in the entire Red Army. Vlasov was subsequently promoted to Major General, and in January 1941, he was appointed commander of the 4th Mechanized Corps, a well-equipped formation on the Ukrainian-Polish border. On Sunday, the 22nd of June 1941, under the code name Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. 3 million German soldiers were reinforced by Finnish, Romanian, Hungarian, Italian, Slovak, and Croatian troops. Within weeks, German divisions conquered the Baltic republics of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. For Nazi Germany, this attack was not an ordinary military operation. The war against the Soviet Union was a war of annihilation between German fascism and Soviet communism, a racial war between German Aryans and subhuman Slavs and Jews. At the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, Vlasov was positioned near Lviv, in western Ukraine, as the commander of the 4th Mechanized Corps. Despite his efforts, Vlasov and his corps were ultimately unsuccessful in halting the German advance deeper into Soviet territory. Nevertheless, for his skillful actions in the battlefield, Vlasov was appointed commander of the 37th Army in Kiev, on the recommendation of Nikita Khrushchev, then a political commissar and close advisor to Stalin. In September 1941, Vlasov and his 37th Army defended Kiev against the German 6th Army, and managed to break out of the encirclement just in time. In November 1941, Stalin summoned Vlasov and ordered him to form the 20th Army, which would join the Western Front to defend the capital. On the 5th of December 1941, the day the counter-offensive near Moscow began, the 20th Army under Vlasov's command halted the advance of the Wehrmacht's 4th Panzer Army in the area of the village of Krasnaya Polyana, located 32 kilometers from the Kremlin, making a significant contribution to the victory near Moscow. Then, overcoming stubborn German resistance, from the 9th to 11th of December, the 20th Army drove the Germans out of Solnechnogorsk and Volokholamsk, which were significant transportation and logistical centers close to the Soviet capital. In late January 1942, for his efforts in the defense of Moscow, Vlasov was awarded the Order of the Red Banner and promoted to lieutenant general. In April 1942, Vlasov became the commander of the 2nd Shock Army, with a mission to break the encirclement of Leningrad, today's St. Petersburg. Along with the other Soviet armies on the 30-kilometer front, they were scheduled to participate in this operation at intervals. Vlasov's army successfully broke through the German 18th Army lines and penetrated 75 kilometers deep into the German rear area. However, the other Soviet armies failed to provide the necessary support, leaving Vlasov's army stranded. Unable to be supplied in their advanced positions and denied permission to retreat, the 2nd Shock Army was quickly running out of ammunition and food. Vlasov's soldiers were so hungry and desperate that they began consuming their horses, followed by tree bark and leather objects. During the Soviet counteroffensive in May 1942, the 2nd Shock Army was finally allowed to retreat. But due to severe hunger and exhaustion, it was so weakened that by June 1942, it was virtually annihilated by the Germans. Vlasov managed to hide for some time in German-occupied territory, but in July 1942, a local farmer exposed him to the Germans. As a reward, the farmer received a cow, 10 packs of tobacco, 2 bottles of vodka, and an honorary certificate from the command of the 18th German Army for turning in Vlasov. Vlasov was then interrogated and asked by the Nazis to switch sides and assist in their advance against the rule of Joseph Stalin and Bolshevism. He agreed, perhaps as revenge against Stalin for not giving his 2nd Shock Army permission to retreat during the encirclement of Leningrad, where he witnessed the hunger and misery of his soldiers. While in captivity, Vlasov founded an anti-Stalin committee composed of Soviet prisoners of war and Nazi collaborators from the territories of the Soviet Union. From the German perspective, the committee's activities were primarily intended for propaganda purposes, to encourage Red Army soldiers to surrender their weapons and higher-ranking officers to defect. In the spring of 1943, Vlasov wrote an anti-Bolshevik leaflet known as the Smolensk Proclamation, which was dropped by the millions from aircraft onto Soviet forces and Soviet-controlled territory. In the proclamation, he condemned Stalin and his regime for their incompetence, terror tactics, and the immense human and material losses suffered by Russia under his rule. Vlasov was even permitted to make several trips to the German-occupied Soviet Union, where he lectured to the Russian prisoners of war about his position on Bolshevism and Stalin. He explained to them that their government had declared them all traitors, and that escaping was pointless. He added that even if the Soviets succeeded, Stalin would send them to Siberia. Vlasov, though, wanted more than just a committee and hoped to create the Russian Liberation Army, which would fight against the Red Army alongside the Germans. Hitler, however, repeatedly refused to even consider this idea. As a result, initially this army existed only on paper and was used by the Germans to encourage Red Army troops to surrender. The Nazi propaganda department issued Russian Liberation Army patches to Russian volunteers and tried to use Vlasov's name to encourage defections. Several 100,000 former Soviet citizens served in the German army wearing this patch, but never under Vlasov's own command. Only in 1944 did Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer SS, aware of Germany's shortage of manpower, finally convince Hitler to establish a Russian Liberation Army. Vlasov was put in charge, and the new army consisted of 10 grenadier divisions, a tank unit, and its own air force. Vlasov's only combat against the Red Army took place on the 11th of February 1945 on the River Oder. After 3 days of battle against overwhelming forces, the 1st Division of the Russian Liberation Army was forced to retreat and marched to Prague in German-controlled Bohemia. On the 6th of May 1945, Vlasov received a request from the commander of the 1st Division of the Russian Liberation Army, General Sergei Bunyachenko, for permission to turn his weapons against the Nazi SS forces and aid Czech resistance fighters in the Prague uprising. Vlasov initially disapproved, but then reluctantly allowed the 1st Division to proceed, possibly to win favor from the Western Allies and securing a better post-war position. 2 days later, the 1st Division was forced to leave Prague as communist Czech partisans began arresting Vlasov's soldiers to hand them over to the Soviets for execution. Vlasov and the rest of his forces, trying to evade the Red Army, attempted to head west to surrender to the Allies in the closing days of the war in Europe. Vlasov and his men were captured by the Red Army 40 kilometers from Pilsen, in the western part of Bohemia, after their attempt to surrender to US troops was rejected. According to the Soviet version, Vlasov was found on the floor of a jeep, wrapped in a carpet. He was then dragged out of the vehicle and taken to Marshal Kornev's headquarters and subsequently to Moscow to stand trial. From the 30th to the 31st of July 1946, a closed trial was held against Vlasov and 11 of his followers, but the decision to sentence them to death had already been made by the Politburo of the Central Committee of the Communist Party 1 week prior. They were all found guilty of high treason, stripped of their military ranks, and their property was confiscated. Andrey Vlasov was 44 years old when on the 1st of August 1946, along with other convicted commanders, he was led into a prison yard in Moscow. For their collaboration with the Nazis, a decision was made to prolong their suffering to an unbearable limit. Therefore, all 12 men were brought to the gallows simultaneously by the Russian executioners, who tightened a very thin but strong rope around their necks. They did not drop them to break their necks, but instead stood them on boxes, which were then taken from under their feet. Vlasov and the others suffered and choked for long minutes before they died. The bodies of the executed were then cremated, and the ashes were dumped into one of the unmarked graves at the Donskoy Cemetery in Moscow, where the ashes of those executed as enemies of the people had been dumped for decades during Soviet rule. There were no tears shed for Andrey Vlasov. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.